My house creaks at night. I don't know if Bertha would have noticed if she were alive. She always slept like a log, even when our Reiner was a baby and screamed as if he were being cut up. I had to get up. Now the house creaks only for me. 73 years old, 45 of them in the accounting department of the transport company, Bridgeway Cargo. And here I am, alone with myself and my old house in Wheeling, which knows all my secrets. The morning begins, as always, with a cup of strong coffee and heart pills. Bertha used to make me oatmeal, saying I needed to watch my cholesterol. Now I eat what I want, when I want. The advantage of widowhood, if you will. Today, just toast with peanut butter. Nothing special. My gaze falls on a photograph standing on the dresser. Bertha and me on our golden wedding anniversary, 4 months before cancer took her. She looked exhausted, but insisted on celebrating. 50 years is 50 years, Eugene. You can't miss that, even if I look like a skeleton. She never looked like a skeleton to me. I rinse the cup and look out the window at the gray October sky. Tuesday is the day I meet Prescott in the park after his art class. The only ray of light in my dull existence is my 7-year-old grandson. Reiner says I spoil the boy. Maybe I do. But what else is left for an old man? Our relationship with our son has long since become a formality. Phone calls on Sundays and obligatory family dinners on major holidays. And it's all because of her, because of Lily. I put on my old coat. The weather in Wheeling is as changeable as my daughter-in-law's mood. It's cold today, and my knee is acting up again. Old accountants don't rust. We just lose our flexibility, like overdue balance sheets. On the way to the park, I stop at Maurice's bakery. I always get Prescott a chocolate glazed pastry. I know Lily doesn't like sweets. That makes it even more enjoyable. The usual, Mr. Holleran? Maurice smiles. He's known me for 20 years, ever since I did his father's tax deductions. The usual, I nod. And a coffee to go, please. I often wonder how it happened that Reiner married Lily. My son was always a smart kid, went to a decent college, got a degree in economics. He had a girlfriend, Naomi, a sweet Jewish girl from a good family. Then he went to that conference in San Francisco and met Lily, an exchange student. 3 months later, she was pregnant. 6 months later, they were married. Bertha tried to be kind. Give her a chance, she said. She's trying. Maybe I should have listened to my wife, but all my instincts screamed that Lily was using Reiner to get citizenship. Her English was terrible. She was always cooking weird-smelling dishes, and she had long conversations in Chinese with her family. I didn't trust her. I still don't. The park is almost empty at this hour. A few mothers with strollers, an elderly couple feeding pigeons, a middle-aged man walking his Labrador. I sit down on our usual bench, the one overlooking the pond, and wait. Prescott usually comes running up, waving his drawings. The boy inherited Bertha's artistic talent. She also loved to draw, although she never did it professionally. She said it helped her think. I see him from a distance. Red hat, blue backpack slung over one shoulder. He runs toward me, and the wrinkles on my face smooth out on their own. "Grandpa!" he shouts from afar. I stand up, preparing for a hug. At 73, I'm still strong enough to lift a 7-year-old boy. "Careful, little bear. Don't break my old bones." I laugh as he crashes into me. "I drew a spaceship." He pulls a crumpled piece of paper out of his backpack. "Look, it can fly to Mars and back in just 1 day." Unbelievable. I pretend to study the scribbles depicting something vaguely resembling a rocket with a huge number of antennas. "You must have studied physics seriously." Prescott giggles. "It's not a real ship, Grandpa. It's science fiction." I take a cookie out of the paper bag, and the boy's eyes light up. "Just don't tell Mom," I wink. "I never tell," Prescott replies seriously. "Mom says sugar is poison." "Your mom says a lot of things," I remark, immediately regretting my words. It's not a good idea to turn a child against his parents, no matter what they're like. Prescott ignores my comment, preoccupied with the chocolate frosting. "Some people have moved into our house," he says with his mouth full. "They talk like Mom. I don't understand them." "Have your Chinese relatives arrived?" I remember Reiner mentioning this in our last phone conversation. "Yeah, Uncle Chung and Aunt May. They brought me a robot that transforms into a dinosaur." "How nice of them," I say, trying to sound sincere. "How long are they staying?" "I don't know." Prescott shrugs. "Dad said 2 weeks, but then they started arguing. Mom was yelling in Chinese." A familiar scene. Lily often switches to her native language when she gets angry. Reiner says it's because she can express her emotions better in Chinese. I think she does it on purpose so that no one understands what she's really saying. What were they arguing about? I ask, trying to sound casual. I don't know, Prescott shrugs again. Something about Dad's job and money. Mom said Uncle Chen could help. Interesting. As far as I know, Reiner works at an investment firm, doing some kind of computer analysis. What could Lily's brother know about that? Who, as far as I remember, owns a restaurant in Beijing or Shanghai. Do you like Uncle Chen? Prescott wrinkles his nose, picking up the remains of the frosting with his finger. He's weird. He's always looking at his phone and doesn't talk much, but he taught me how to count to 10 in Chinese. Really? I smile. Show me. Prescott proudly demonstrates his knowledge, mangling the pronunciation. I applaud his efforts. Now you can talk to your mom in her language. I tried. The boy's face becomes serious, but she said I was speaking incorrectly. And then she and Uncle laughed. I feel a familiar wave of irritation rising inside me. It's typical of Lily to mock a child's attempts. Don't worry about it, I say, ruffling his red hair, which is just like Bertha's. The important thing is that you're trying. We sit in the park for about another hour. Prescott talks about school, about his friend Elliot, who brought a toad to class, about how the teacher made him apologize to a girl because he said her drawing looked like a squashed tomato. I listen, occasionally commenting, but mostly just enjoying my grandson's company. He makes me feel alive. When it starts to get dark, I walk him to the bus stop. Reiner insists that the boy walk home on his own, believing it develops independence. I would gladly drive him, but Reiner is stubborn, just like his mother. See you on Tuesday, Bear, I say, helping him zip up his jacket. How about sooner? Prescott asked hopefully. Mom said something about a family dinner this weekend. I freeze. Lily usually tries to minimize our encounters. Did your mom invite me to dinner? Well, she talked to Dad, and they said we should invite you because you're family too, Prescott explains with childlike candor. I'll think about it, I reply evasively, not wanting to promise something I might not be able to deliver. The bus pulls up, and Prescott climbs inside, waving at me through the window. I stand at the bus stop until the bus disappears from view, then slowly wander home. I spend the evening as usual. Dinner in front of the TV, today reheated soup from a can, mindless channel surfing, reading the newspaper, which I still subscribe to out of old habit. At 10 o'clock, the phone rings. Reiner, oddly enough. Dad? His voice sounds a little tense. What's wrong? I ask. Reiner rarely calls on weekdays. Nothing, just... Did you talk to Prescott today? Yes, we met in the park after his class, as usual on Tuesdays. Oh, yes. He sounds as if he had forgotten about it. Listen, Lily and I were thinking, her brother and his wife from China are visiting us. We're having a family dinner on Saturday. We wanted to invite you. I'm silent for a few seconds, surprised by the direct invitation. Prescott mentioned something about it, I finally say. I didn't know it was a formal invitation. Of course it's formal. Reiner sounds a little annoyed. You're my father, and Lily really wants you to meet her brother. I doubt Lily really wants that, but I decide not to argue. What time? 6. Nothing formal, just a family dinner. Okay, I'll come, I agree, thinking of Prescott. For his sake, I'm willing to endure the awkwardness of interacting with Lily and her relatives. Great, Reiner says with relief. And Dad? Yes? Please be, well, polite. I feel irritation rising inside me. I'm always polite, Reiner. You know what I mean, he sighs. Just don't make any comments about her accent or Chinese politics. Chung is quite sensitive about those things. I'll be as polite as can be, I reply dryly. After the call, I sit in my chair for a long time, staring at the dark TV screen. I wonder why they suddenly decided to invite me. In all 5 years of Reiner and Lily's marriage, I think I've only seen her relatives twice, at the wedding and when Prescott was born. Lily has always been careful to keep her Chinese family and her American family separate, and now suddenly a family dinner. I remember Prescott's words about arguments and that Lily's brother could help Reiner with his work. Maybe my son has financial problems? He never talks to me about such things. We used to be close, especially after Bertha's death. But then he met Lily, and everything changed. At first, I tried to be diplomatic for Rainer's sake, but after Prescott was born, the tension grew. Lily insisted on some strange Chinese parenting practices that seemed absurd to me. Rainer always took her side. "It's her culture, Dad," he would say, as if that explained everything. When Bertha died, it got even worse. She had always been a buffer between me and my daughter-in-law, smoothing over the rough edges. Without her, Lily and I openly showed our mutual dislike. Reiner tried to reconcile us, but eventually he just withdrew. Only Prescott keeps us together as a family of sorts. And for his sake, I'll go to this dinner, smile, nod, and pretend to be interested in listening to conversations in broken English about things that don't concern me. I go upstairs to the bedroom I once shared with Bertha. Her side of the bed remains untouched, as if she had just stepped out and would be back soon. Sometimes at night, I think I feel her presence, hear her voice. "Don't be so stubborn, Eugene," she would say about the upcoming dinner. "Give them a chance." Maybe she's right. Maybe I should try again. For Rainer's sake, for Prescott's sake, for Bertha's memory. I fall asleep with this thought, but wake up in the middle of the night with a vague sense of unease. I dream that I am sitting at a table with Lily and her relatives, and they are all speaking Chinese, laughing and pointing at me. I don't understand a word, but somehow I know they're plotting something sinister. Prescott sits between them, a sad expression on his face, as if he's trying to warn me about something but can't speak. A silly dream, born of my prejudices. I roll over and try to go back to sleep, but the anxiety won't let go. Something is wrong with this sudden invitation. Something is wrong with Lily's brother's visit, and I intend to find out what it is. Saturday comes too quickly. I spent the morning wandering aimlessly around the house, trying to distract myself from thoughts of the upcoming dinner. I sorted through old receipts, which I keep out of accountant's habit, dusted the bookshelves, and even washed the windows in the living room, something I hadn't done since last spring. Nothing helped to calm my anxiety. At 4 o'clock, I began to get ready. I chose the dark blue jacket that Bertha had given me for my 70th birthday, ironed my white shirt, and cleaned my old but still decent shoes. It was a strange feeling, dressing up to visit my own son, as if I were going to a job interview or a first date. I left the house 2 hours before the appointed time. The drive to Reiner's takes about 20 minutes, but I prefer to have some extra time. Age has taught me that being late always happens at the most inopportune moment. On the way, I stopped at a wine shop and spent a long time choosing the right wine. In the end, I settled on a California Cabernet. Not too expensive, but not cheap either. Before turning onto the street where my son lives, I made one more stop at a small toy store. I chose a set of colored pencils for Prescott. The boy loves to draw, and I like to encourage this hobby, which reminds me of Bertha. Reiner's house is a typical suburban home with a neatly trimmed lawn and decorative bushes along the driveway. Long ago, I dreamed that my son would live near me, that we would spend weekends together, work in the garden, and cook barbecues. But Reiner chose a house 30 minutes away in a nicer neighborhood. I don't blame him. Everyone wants the best for their family. An unfamiliar black SUV with tinted windows was parked in the driveway. Apparently, Lily's relatives had rented the car. I parked behind it and sat for a minute, gathering my thoughts. "It's just dinner, Eugene," I would have said to myself if I were a more frivolous person, but I was never like that. Reiner opened the door, a tense smile on his face. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept for several nights. "Dad, you're early," he said, looking at his watch. "It's only 5:30. "Sorry, I prefer to be punctual," I replied, handing him a bottle of wine. "I hope it will go well with dinner." "Sure, thanks." He took the bottle but didn't invite me in, instead looking nervously over his shoulder. "Listen, we're not quite ready yet. Lily and Chung are discussing something." Loud voices speaking Chinese came from inside the house. The female voice, Lily apparently, sounded sharp and abrupt, while the male voice responded more calmly but insistently. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to contain my irritation. Typical of Lily, staging a family scandal before guests arrive. Yes, just cultural differences." Reiner rubbed his forehead. "Come in. I'll show you to the living room. Prescott will be glad to see you." I walked into the house, trying to ignore the ongoing conversation in Chinese, which seemed to quiet down when I appeared. The living room was neatly tidied up, and there was a vase of flowers on the coffee table that I didn't remember from my last visit. There were new photos on the walls. Lily with relatives in some park, apparently in China. Prescott was sitting on the floor playing with a tablet. When he saw me, he jumped up and rushed to hug my legs. "Grandpa, you came." "Of course I came," I smiled, taking a bag of pencils out of my pocket. "And I brought you something." The boy's eyes lit up when he saw the gift. "Wow, real professional pencils." "Thank you, Grandpa." Reiner watched us with an unreadable expression on his face, then sighed. "Prescott, why don't you show Grandpa your new game while I help Mom and Uncle with dinner?" When Reiner disappeared into the kitchen, Prescott moved closer to me and whispered, "They're arguing again." "What about this time?" I asked just as quietly. "I'm not sure," the boy shrugged. "Something about papers and signatures. Mom says Uncle Chung could ruin everything, and Dad says everything's under control." "Interesting." I wanted to ask my grandson more questions, but just then Lily walked into the living room. She looked impeccable, as always, her black hair perfectly styled, minimal makeup, a modest but elegant dress. No one would ever guess that a minute ago she was yelling at her brother. "Ah, Eugene," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nice to see you. Sorry for the delay. We're still getting ready." Her English had improved over the past 5 years, but her accent was still jarring. She never pronounced my name correctly, always putting the stress on the wrong syllable. "It's okay," I replied, standing up. "I'm in good company." I put my hand on Prescott's shoulder, and the boy snuggled up to me. Lily gave her son a strange look, somewhere between irritation and concern. "Prescott, go help set the table," she said. "But Mom, I'm showing Grandpa my new game." "Right now," Lily said, her voice taking on a steely tone. Prescott sighed but obeyed, giving me an apologetic look. When he left, Lily turned to me. "My brother and his wife are very eager to meet you. They've heard a lot about you." I wondered what exactly they had heard. I doubted that Lily had spoken highly of her father-in-law. "I look forward to it," I lied. Lily seemed to want to add something, but changed her mind and simply nodded. "Dinner will be ready in 15 minutes. Left alone, I looked around more carefully. On the dresser, I noticed a stack of papers. They looked like official documents with red seals. Curiosity got the better of me, and I moved closer. The documents were in Chinese, but the names at the bottom were in Latin script. One of them looked familiar. Chen Guoliang, Lily's brother, if I remember correctly. I didn't have time to look at the rest because I heard footsteps and quickly returned to the sofa. A tall, thin Chinese man in his 40s entered the living room, with neatly trimmed hair and thin-frame glasses. He was followed by a petite woman of about the same age, with a shy smile and a wary look. "You must be Reiner's father," said the man with a strong accent, but with sufficient confidence. "I'm Chung, Lily's brother. This is my wife, May." I stood up and shook his outstretched hand, which was dry and cool. "Eugene Holleran, nice to meet you." "I've heard a lot about you," Chung smiled, but his eyes behind his glasses remained cold. "Lily says you were an accountant?" "Yes, at a transportation company. 45 years. "A very respectable profession," Chung nodded. "In China, we respect our elders and their wisdom in financial matters." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or something else, so I just nodded. May stood slightly behind her husband, smiling politely, but didn't say a word. "Your grandson is a wonderful boy," Chung continued. "Very smart. In China, he would already be studying advanced mathematics." "He's more interested in art," I replied, feeling the need to defend Prescott's choice. "He has a talent for drawing." "Ah, yes, art." Chung made an indefinite gesture with his hand. "A good hobby. But the future lies in science and technology. Maybe when he's older, he could come to China to study. We have excellent universities." I cringed at the thought of my grandson going so far away, but I held back. "That's a long way off." "Time flies, Mr. Holleran." Chung looked at me as if he knew something I didn't. "Very quickly." Fortunately, the awkward conversation was interrupted by Reiner, who announced that dinner was ready. We moved to the dining room, where the table was set with dishes, most of which I didn't recognize. There was a strong smell of spices and something fermented. Reiner seated me between himself and Prescott, for which I was grateful. Chung and May sat opposite us, and Lily sat at the head of the table, which surprised me a little. In my family, the head of the family always sat at the head of the table, and that was Reiner. But apparently they had their own customs. Dinner began with an awkward silence, broken only by the clatter of chopsticks on porcelain. Prescott, who had been given permission to eat with a fork, whispered to me, "Try these dumplings, Grandpa. They're not spicy." I followed his advice and was surprised. The dumplings were really delicious, filled with pork and something else I couldn't identify. "Excellent," I said, nodding to Lily. "You're a great cook." It was the first sincere compliment I had given her in many months. Lily looked surprised but pleased. "Thank you, Eugene. It's a family recipe," my mother taught me. "Cooking traditions are very important in our family," Chung chimed in. "Food brings people together, creates, how can I put it, bonds?" Reiner suggested. "Yes, bonds," Chung nodded. "In China, family ties are the most important thing. Business, friendship, everything is built on trust and mutual assistance among relatives. Family is important in America too," I remarked, feeling a strange need to defend my country. Of course," Chung quickly agreed, "but in a different way. Here, children leave home at 18. In China, several generations often live together and care for each other. Parents help their children with business, and children take care of their parents in their old age." I felt a twinge. Was this a hint that I lived apart from my son, or that I don't help him with his work? "Every culture has its own characteristics," Reiner replied diplomatically. "We try to take the best from both. That's why we're here," Chung raised his wine glass, "to the union of cultures and families." We drank. The conversation gradually became more relaxed, but I couldn't shake the feeling of tension, especially when Lily and Chung periodically switched to Chinese, exchanging phrases quickly, and then returned to English as if nothing had happened. Several times I noticed Chung casting appraising glances at me. After the main courses, Lily served dessert, some kind of jelly pudding with fruit. "Tell me, Eugene," Chung said to me, putting down his dessert, "do you still drive?" It was a strange question, especially given the tone in which it was asked, as if he were asking an old man if it was time for him to go to a nursing home. "Of course," I replied dryly. "I've been driving since I was 17, and I don't intend to stop." "That's good," Chung nodded. "Independence is important for someone of your experience." "Dad's an excellent driver," Reiner interjected. "His reflexes are better than many young people's." "I don't doubt it," Chung smiled. "It's just that in China, older people don't usually drive. Their families take care of them and drive them where they need to go." "I don't need a babysitter," I said more sharply than I intended, "and I prefer to control where and when I go." An awkward silence ensued. Prescott, sensing the tension, started chatting about his new computer game, lightening the mood. Reiner looked gratefully at his son and joined the conversation. Gradually, the tension eased, and when dessert was over, Lily suggested moving to the living room for coffee and tea. In the living room, Prescott tugged at my sleeve. "Grandpa, do you want to see my new dinosaur collection?" "Of course, Bear." I was glad for the opportunity to slip away from Chung and May's company. I went up to Prescott's room with him, where he showed me colorful dinosaur figurines, proudly naming each one by name and species. I listened half-heartedly, my thoughts still revolving around Chung's strange questions and the documents I had noticed. "Do you like Uncle Chung?" I asked casually. Prescott frowned. "He's strange. He looks at me as if I'm some kind of bug under a microscope. And he's always talking to Dad about work and money." "What do they talk about?" "I don't know exactly. They use complicated words, something about Dad's company and investments. Uncle Chung says he can help Dad make a lot of money." "Interesting." Reiner never mentioned any financial problems, but then again, we haven't been very open with each other lately. Our conversation was interrupted by Lily, who peeked into the room. "Prescott, it's time for bed." "But Mom, it's still early. I'm showing Grandpa my dinosaurs." "It's almost 9. You have a schedule," Lily said gently but firmly. Then she turned to me. "Eugene, Chung wanted to talk to you before you left. Something about old American cars. He's a collector." I nodded, kissed Prescott goodnight, and went down to the living room. Chung was sitting in an armchair, sipping cognac from a low glass. Reiner and May were nowhere to be seen. "Ah, Eugene, have a seat." Chung pointed to the chair opposite him. "Would you like some cognac?" "No, thank you, I'm driving," I replied, sitting down. Wise decision, Chung nodded. Reiner said you have a Ford Taurus? Yes, a 2008 model. It's a good car, reliable. Americans love big cars, Chung smiled. In China, they prefer compact cars because of the roads and parking. But I've always admired American cars. They're so powerful. I didn't understand where he was going with this, but decided to keep the conversation going. The Ford Taurus has a good engine, and spare parts are easy to find if something breaks. Does anything break often? Chung leaned forward, his eyes behind his glasses suddenly becoming very attentive. No, the car's in good condition. I keep up with the maintenance. Of course, of course. Chung leaned back, relaxing. Just asking. You know, cars are like people. They require more attention as they age. That condescending tone again. I was starting to lose my patience. What are you getting at, Mr. Chung? Just making conversation, he smiled. And please call me Chung. We're family after all. At that moment, Reiner and May returned. My son looked pale and tense. Dad, are you ready to go? He asked. Yes, I think so, I said, getting up. Thanks for dinner. It was informative. By the way, Lily appeared in the doorway. We're having another family dinner next Saturday before Chung and May leave. It would be nice if you could come. I noticed Reiner glance at his wife in surprise. It seemed that this invitation had not been agreed with him. I'd be happy to, I lied for the second time that evening. Great, Chung raised his glass. I look forward to seeing you again, Eugene. On the way home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Too many oddities. The documents on the dresser, the unexpected invitations, the intrusive questions about my car, and those shifts to Chinese, accompanied by glances in my direction. Maybe I was becoming paranoid. Bertha always said I had a vivid imagination, especially when it came to Lily. You see conspiracies where there aren't any, Eugene, she would say. She's just different, that's all. But my instincts, honed over 73 years of life, were screaming danger. Something was wrong with this family idol, with these Chinese relatives, with these strange questions. And I intend to find out what it is. At home, I sat in the dark for a long time, staring out the window at the empty street. Maybe I'm just an old, suspicious man, unable to accept cultural differences. Maybe Chung was just trying to be friendly, and I took it as a threat. But then why the documents? Why the questions about the car? Why the tension between Reiner and Lily, which they tried to hide but which was obvious to a father's eye? I remembered Prescott's words about Chung talking to Reiner about money and investments. Maybe the son was in financial trouble and turned to his wife's relatives for help. That would explain a lot. The tension, the documents, even Lily's sudden friendliness. She had always been ambitious. Maybe she saw a chance to gain control of the family's finances through her brother? Thoughts swirled in my head, keeping me awake. I felt confused, yet confident that my anxiety was not unfounded. Something was coming, something bad, and somehow it was connected to me, to my car, to the upcoming family dinner. Bertha would tell me to stop dramatizing and just talk to my son. But I know Reiner. He'll shut down as soon as he senses I'm prying into his business. What if he really is in trouble? And I'm wrong about Chung and Lily's intentions. What if my bias is preventing me from seeing a simple explanation for all this? I went to bed with a heavy heart and restless thoughts. One thing I was sure of, next Saturday would be decisive, and I had to be ready for any turn of events. The week flew by in anxious anticipation. Several times I was tempted to call Reiner, thinking up various excuses, but each time I put the phone down. What could I say? Son, I think your wife and her brother are up to something. Without proof, it would sound like the ravings of a suspicious old man and would only worsen our relationship. On Tuesday, I hoped to meet Prescott in the park and cautiously question him. But Reiner called in the morning and said that the boy had caught a cold and would not be going to school. This increased my anxiety. My grandson was almost never sick. By Saturday, my nerves were stretched tight. I slept poorly, lost my appetite, and my old ulcer began to act up. Bertha would have called it self-hypnosis. You're winding yourself up, Eugene, she would have said. And then you wonder why your stomach hurts. This time I decided not to arrive early. I left the house at exactly 2:30 to arrive at 3 Kerns, as agreed. It was a cloudy day with low gray clouds threatening rain. The mood of nature matched my inner state. On the way, I stopped at a flower shop and bought a small bouquet for Lily. A gesture of courtesy, nothing more. This time I didn't buy a gift for Prescott, deciding that too many gifts might cause his parents to become dissatisfied. As I approached my son's house, I noticed that Chung's black SUV was parked in the same spot as a week ago. In addition to it, there was another unfamiliar car parked in the driveway, a silver sedan with tinted windows. I wondered who else had been invited to the family dinner. Reiner hadn't mentioned any other guests. I rang the doorbell, trying to look calm, even though my heart was beating faster than usual. Prescott opened the door, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Grandpa!" He rushed to hug me, and I felt a familiar warmth in my chest. Whatever was happening with the rest of the family, my bond with my grandson remained unchanged. "Hello, little bear." I bent down and hugged him. "How's your cold?" "I'm all better now," he replied cheerfully. "Mom gave me some Chinese tea. It was very bitter, but it helped." "Glad to hear it." I patted him on the head. "Is everyone else here?" "Yes, they're in the living room. Uncle Chung brought his friend." Prescott made a funny face. "He talks even less than Aunt May." I entered the house and Prescott pulled me by the hand into the living room. The whole group was there: Reiner, Lily, Cheng, and May, as well as a middle-aged Chinese man with a stern, impenetrable face whom I didn't know. He was dressed in a strict gray suit that seemed out of place for a family dinner. "Dad, good afternoon." Reiner stood up to greet me. He looked even more tired than last time, with deep shadows under his eyes. "I'm glad you could make it." "I promised," I said, handing Lily the bouquet. "This is for you, a small token of my appreciation for the invitation." Lily looked surprised but accepted the flowers with a polite smile. "Thank you, Eugene. That's very kind of you." Chung stood up and walked over to me, extending his hand. "It's good to see you again, Eugene. Allow me to introduce my business partner, Mr. Xiao." The stranger nodded but did not stand up or extend his hand. I responded with a nod of my own, feeling a growing sense of unease. Who was this man, and what did business partner mean? What business did Chung have in Willing? "Mr. Xiao doesn't speak English very well," Chung explained, as if apologizing. "But he really wanted to meet an American family." Something about this explanation seemed false to me, but I decided not to dwell on it. "I hope he likes Willing," I said neutrally. Chung translated my words, and Xiao replied with a short phrase in Chinese. "He says the town is small but nice," Chung translated with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The conversation continued in the same tense vein. Reiner was unusually quiet, answering in monosyllables when addressed. Lily, on the other hand, was animated, constantly switching between English and Chinese when talking to her brother and Xiao. May, as before, kept to herself, smiling and nodding occasionally. Prescott sat next to me on the sofa, closer than usual. I noticed that he was watching the adults closely, especially when they spoke Chinese. At one point, when Chung said something quickly to Xiao, glancing in my direction, the boy tensed up. "What's going on, bear cub?" I whispered to him when the others were busy talking. "I don't know," he whispered back. "But they keep talking about you and some car, and Mom is angry." This confirmed my suspicions. They were indeed discussing me in a language I didn't understand, and for some reason they mentioned a car. My car? "What exactly are they saying?" I asked quietly. "Do you understand Chinese?" "A little," Prescott shrugged. "Individual words. I heard grandfather and car, and something else about careful or dangerous." My stomach clenched. Before I could ask my grandson for more details, Lily announced that dinner was ready, and everyone moved to the dining room. This time, the table was set even more exquisitely. Lily was clearly trying to impress the mysterious Mr. Xiao. The dishes looked more elaborate and refined than last time. I noticed that Rainer hardly touched his food, only occasionally bringing his fork to his mouth for show. The conversation at the table was conducted mainly in Chinese. Chung sometimes translated individual phrases, but I felt excluded from the conversation. Prescott sat quietly, poking at his plate with his chopsticks. Unlike me, he knew how to use them, albeit not very skillfully. At one point, Chung raised his glass and made a toast in Chinese, which Lily translated as "to family happiness and prosperity." Everyone drank, and I noticed that Reiner drained his glass in one gulp. Unusual behavior for my son, who was usually moderate with alcohol. After the main courses, Lily began to clear the plates. I offered to help, but she insisted that I stay at the table. Rainer also got up and followed his wife into the kitchen. Chung, Mei, and Xiao continued their conversation in Chinese, completely ignoring me. Prescott tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Grandpa, I need to tell you something. Come with me." I apologized and left the table. Prescott led me into the hallway, where he stopped at the stairs, looking around nervously. "What's the matter, Bear Cub?" I asked, leaning toward him. The boy brought his mouth close to my ear and whispered in a trembling voice, "They said your car will explode. My mom gave the order." I felt the blood drain from my face. My first thought was that I had misheard or that Prescott had mixed something up. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "Who said that?" "Uncle Cheng and that other man," Prescott whispered, his eyes wide with fear. They were speaking Chinese, but I understood some of the words. They said something about the car, an explosion, and Mom nodded and said, "Okay, I'm scared, Grandpa." I tried to make sense of what I had heard. Could Lily and her brother really be planning to do something to my car? It seemed absurd, like something out of a cheap thriller. But Prescott's fear was real, and my own suspicions about Lily's strange behavior and Chung's questions about my car suddenly took on a sinister meaning. "Are you sure you understood correctly?" I asked, trying to remain calm for my grandson's sake. "Maybe they were talking about another car?" Prescott shook his head firmly. "No, they said Lao Hu, which means tiger or old tiger, which is what Mom sometimes calls you when she thinks I can't hear. And they said Ford. I heard that for sure." My heart began to race. Prescott couldn't have made up those details. "Thank you for telling me," I said, putting my hands on my grandson's shoulders. "Don't worry, At that moment, Reiner entered the hallway carrying a tray of desserts. He stopped when he saw us, his gaze darting from me to my son and back again. "What's going on?" he asked tensely. "Why are you here?" "Prescott wanted to show me his new drawings," I lied, trying to sound natural. "We're on our way back." Reiner looked at us suspiciously, clearly not believing us. "Dessert is ready. Lily will be upset if you miss it." "Of course," I nodded, gently guiding Prescott back to the dining room. "We're coming." As we passed my son, I noticed that his hands were shaking slightly and beads of sweat had formed on his forehead. He looked like a man on the verge of a nervous breakdown. In the dining room, Lily was arranging dessert on plates, some kind of elaborate pudding with nuts and fruit. She glanced at me quickly when I returned, but said nothing. Chung and Xiao interrupted their conversation and watched me with unreadable expressions on their faces. I sat down in my seat, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. My thoughts raced frantically. If what Prescott said was true, I couldn't get in my car. But how could I explain my sudden departure? And should I call the police? Would they believe me without evidence? "Eugene, are you okay?" Chung asked, looking at me with feigned concern. "You look pale." I took a deep breath, deciding to play the health card. "I'm not feeling very well. Maybe I ate something bad yesterday." "Oh, I'm sorry," Lily looked concerned, but I couldn't tell if she was being sincere or not. "How about some ginger tea? In China, it's a traditional remedy for upset stomachs." "No, thank you." I shook my head. "I think I'd better go home and lie down." "But you'll try the dessert?" Lily insisted. "I made it especially for today's dinner." "I'm sorry, but I really don't feel well," I said, getting up from the table. "Reiner, could you walk me out?" My son looked confused, shifting his gaze between me and Lily, as if he didn't know what to do. Finally, he nodded. "Of course, Dad." I said goodbye to the others, trying to look sick but not dramatic. Zhao just nodded, Mei muttered something in Chinese, and Chung expressed his hope to see me again soon, with an unpleasant smile that made me cringe inwardly. Prescott looked worried, his eyes full of fear as I leaned in to hug him goodbye. "Everything will be fine," I whispered to him. "Don't worry." Reiner walked me to the front door. When we were out of earshot of the others, he asked in a tense voice, "What's going on, Dad? Are you really feeling sick, or is it something else?" I looked at my son, trying to decide how candid to be. If he was involved in Lily and Chung's plans, my candor could make things worse. If not, he could help. But his exhausted appearance and nervousness made me cautious. "I'm really not feeling well," I said. "And the atmosphere—" "I'm sorry, Reiner, but I feel out of place with all this Chinese talk." My son looked down, looking guilty. "I'm sorry. I know it's rude. It's just that Chung and Xiao's English is really bad, and sometimes it's easier." "I understand," I interrupted him. "Don't worry about it. You better tell me if everything's okay with you." What do you mean? Reiner tensed up. You look tired and nervous. Problems at work? He hesitated as if he wanted to say something but changed his mind. Nothing serious. Just a stressful period. I nodded, deciding not to press him. If you need any help, you know you can come to me. I know, Dad, thanks, he said, opening the front door. Are you sure you can drive home yourself? There it was, the moment of decision. Would I get in my car after Prescott's warning? The rational part of me said it was absurd that a 7-year-old boy could misunderstand a conversation in a language he barely spoke. But my instinct for self-preservation screamed danger. Actually, I said, making up my mind, I think I'll call a taxi. I'm feeling a little dizzy and don't want to risk driving. I can drive you, Reiner offered, but without much enthusiasm. No, you have guests. I'll be fine. I stepped out onto the porch, glancing back at my Ford Taurus parked at the curb. It looked the same as always, silver, slightly worn by the years, but a reliable car that had never let me down. Was there really something wrong with it? Or was I succumbing to childhood fantasies and my own paranoia? I'll call a taxi, I said, taking out my phone. Don't stand out in the cold. Go back to your guests. Reiner hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Get well, Dad. Call me when you get home so I know everything's okay. I will, I promised. When my son disappeared behind the door, I walked away from the house and called a taxi through the app. Then I looked at my car thinking, should I check it now? Or would it be better to come back later, perhaps with someone who knows about cars? The decision came naturally. I was too upset and confused to deal with it now. It was better to leave, collect my thoughts, and decide what to do next. If there really was something wrong with the car, it would be better to approach it with a clear head. The taxi arrived in 10 minutes. I got into the back seat, taking one last look at my son's house. In the living room window, I thought I saw Prescott's face pressed against the glass. My heart sank with worry, not for myself, but for my grandson. What if he got into trouble for warning me? I sat in the taxi on the way home, lost in thought, barely responding to the driver's attempts to strike up a conversation. What should I do with this information? Go to the police? But what would I say? My Chinese daughter-in-law may be planning to kill me, according to my 7-year-old grandson. They would think I was a senile old man with racist prejudices. Talk to Reiner? But if he was involved, it would only alert them. And if not, he might not believe me and side with his wife, which would only exacerbate our already strained relationship. When the taxi stopped at my house, I paid and got out, feeling more alone and helpless than ever before. If only Bertha were alive. She always knew what to say, what to do in difficult situations. When I entered the house, I locked all the doors, something I didn't usually do in peaceful willing. Then I sat down in an armchair in the living room, staring at the phone. I needed advice. I needed help. And I knew only one person I could trust unconditionally, my old friend Oliver, a former car mechanic and the most straightforward person in Wheeling. Deciding not to delay, I dialed his number, ready to tell him everything, even if he thought I was crazy. Because if Prescott's warning was true, then my life was indeed in danger. Oliver took my call without surprise. In 40 years of friendship, he had grown accustomed to my contacting him only in exceptional circumstances. The old mechanic listened to my story without interrupting, only occasionally grunting into the phone. When I finished, he was silent for several long seconds. "So you believe the boy?" he finally asked in his hoarse, smoke-filled voice. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Maybe he misunderstood something. But all those strange questions about my car, the documents, the tension. Something's not right here, Ollie." He grunted again. "How many relatives does this Chinese woman of yours have in town?" "Her brother and his wife, and some business partner." 3. "And you say they constantly switch to Chinese when you're around?" "Yes, constantly. And judging by their looks, they often discuss me." "Well, you shouldn't be surprised," Oliver grumbled. "You've never hidden your disapproval of your son's choice." "That's irrelevant," I objected. "The point is that my grandson overheard them discussing the possibility of blowing up my car." All right, Oliver relented. "What do you want to do?" "Check the car first if there really is something wrong with it." "Good idea," he agreed. "Where is it now?" "It's still at Reiner's house. I took a taxi." "Smart move," Oliver approved. "Here's what I'll do. Early tomorrow morning, while everyone is still asleep, we'll go and check on your old banger. I'll be at your place at 6, so have some strong coffee ready. I gratefully agreed, and that was the end of our conversation. I spent the rest of the day in anxious anticipation, glancing out the window every now and then, as if expecting to see Lily or her brother there. I knew I was being paranoid, but I couldn't help myself. I spent most of the night awake, tossing and turning, thinking about Prescott. What if Lily found out he had warned me? What if the child was in danger? By morning, I was exhausted from anxiety and sleeplessness, but ready for action. Oliver arrived at 6 o'clock sharp, as promised. Despite the early hour, he was alert and businesslike, wearing his usual overalls with lots of pockets from which various tools protruded. Even at 75, he retained an amazing liveliness and energy. "You look like shit," he stated, instead of greeting me. "Thanks, you look damn attractive too," I replied, pouring him the promised coffee. Oliver smiled as he took the mug. "Did you lie awake all night thinking about Chinese spies?" "Very funny." I rubbed my temple. "I'm worried about my grandson." "I understand," Oliver nodded, instantly becoming serious. "But first, let's deal with the car. If there really is something wrong with it, we'll have proof." We drank our coffee and drove to Reiner's house in Oliver's car, an old pickup truck that he had kept in perfect condition for 20 years. On the way, I glanced nervously around, expecting to see Chung's black SUV, but the streets were empty at this early hour. My son's house looked quiet and asleep. All the windows were dark, and there was no movement in the yard. My Ford Taurus was where I had left it, parked on the curb across from the house. "Park further away," I asked Oliver. "I don't want us to be seen." "You watch too many detective shows," he grumbled, but he complied with my request, stopping the pickup around the corner. We walked to my car. The morning was cold and foggy, our breath forming clouds of steam. Oliver briskly walked around the car, carefully examining the body, then knelt down to look under the undercarriage. "Do you have the keys?" he asked, straightening up. I took out the keys and handed them to him. Oliver opened the hood and immersed himself in studying the engine, muttering to himself from time to time. I looked around nervously, afraid that someone would notice us. "So what's going on?" I couldn't hold back after a few minutes. "Be quiet," Oliver hissed, continuing his inspection. Then he straightened up and wiped his hands with a rag he took out of one of his countless pockets. "Well, the good news is that your car isn't rigged with explosives." "And the bad news?" I asked tensely. "The bad news is that someone has clearly tampered with the brake system," Oliver said, his face serious. "The brake hose has been partially cut, very neatly. If you had driven a few miles, especially at speed, it would have burst. The brakes would have failed." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Are you sure?" 35 years of fixing cars," Oliver grumbled. "I know sabotage when I see it." I leaned against the car, feeling weak in the legs. So Prescott was right. Someone really did want to cause me to have an accident. But an explosion? Maybe my grandson misunderstood or mistranslated something. "What do we do now?" I asked. "The police?" "For what?" Oliver shook his head. "We have no proof of who did it. I bet they'll say it's normal wear and tear or road damage." "But you just said—" "I know what I see," he interrupted me. "But without witnesses, it's just the word of an old mechanic against—" "Who? Your sister-in-law? Based on the testimony of a 7-year-old child?" "It won't work, Eugene." He was right, and I knew it. Without direct evidence, the police were unlikely to take any action. "What do you suggest?" I asked, feeling cornered. "First," Oliver opened the hood again. "I'll fix your car. It'll take about 15 minutes. Then you'll drive home and be very careful. If they think they sabotaged your car, let them think the plan worked. In the meantime, we'll try to figure out what's going on. I have to talk to Reiner," I decided. "He needs to know that his wife—" "Hold on." Oliver put his hand on my shoulder. "We don't know for sure that it was Lily or her brother. It could have been anyone. And if your son is involved, you'll only be warning them." "Reiner couldn't—" I began, but fell silent, remembering my son's strange behavior in recent weeks, his nervousness, his tension. What if he really knew? What if he was part of it? Oliver, meanwhile, got to work. He really was a master of his craft. In less than 15 minutes, my Ford's brake system was in perfect working order. "All done," he announced, closing the hood. "Now you can drive. But Eugene," he looked me straight in the eye, "be careful. If someone wants to hurt you, they may try again. Thanks, Ollie. I shook my old friend's hand. I don't know what I'd do without you. The same as always, he smiled. You'd do something stupid. We went our separate ways. Oliver went home, and I decided to stop by the nearest cafe first to collect my thoughts. Sitting down at a table by the window with a cup of strong coffee, I took out my phone and dialed my son's number. The phone rang for a long time, and I was already thinking that he wouldn't answer when I finally heard his voice. Dad? Reiner sounded surprised and a little wary. Is everything okay? Yes, everything's fine, I replied, trying to sound normal. I just wanted to see how you were doing after yesterday. Fine, he paused. Are you feeling better? Yes, thank you. I slept well, and my stomach has settled down, I paused. Reiner, we need to talk. About what? His voice tensed again. Not on the phone, I said. Could you meet with me? Alone? A long silence. Then, I don't think that's a good idea, Dad. I have a lot of work to do, and Chung and May are still here. It's important, Reiner. I tried not to press too hard, but I was insistent. It's about Prescott. It worked. After a short pause, he said, Okay, where and when? We agreed to meet in 2 hours in a small park near my house, a public enough place that I would feel safe, but not too crowded for a private conversation. After hanging up, I thought about what I would say to my son. Would I accuse his wife of attempted murder? Would I ask if he was involved? These thoughts made me feel sick. I finished my coffee and headed home to get myself ready for the meeting. At home, I took a shower, got dressed, and sat down in an armchair, thinking about how to approach the upcoming conversation. Everything that was happening seemed surreal, like the plot of a cheap movie. My Chinese sister-in-law and her brother were planning to kill me. It sounded absurd even in my head. And yet the brake hose had been slashed. That was an indisputable fact. 15 minutes before the appointed time, I left the house and walked to the park. The day was gray and damp, matching my mood. The park was almost empty, with only a few dog walkers strolling along the paths and an elderly couple sitting on a bench by the pond. I chose a bench away from them and sat down to wait. Reiner was always punctual, just like me, so I wasn't surprised to see him approaching at exactly the appointed time. He was dressed in a business suit, apparently planning to go to work after our meeting. Hi, Dad, he said, sitting down next to me, looking a little tense. You wanted to talk about Prescott? I studied my son's face, trying to figure out what he knew and what he didn't. He looked exhausted, deep shadows under his eyes, pale skin, a tense line around his mouth. Yes, about Prescott, I began cautiously. He said something strange to me yesterday, something that scared him. Reiner tensed even more. What exactly? He said he heard Lily, Chung, and their friend Xiao talking about my car. Something about it exploding. I watched my son's reaction closely. For a moment, his face showed genuine shock, then concern, and finally something like understanding. Dad, Reiner said slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. Prescott doesn't understand Chinese very well. He could have misinterpreted something. I checked the car, Reiner, I interrupted him. The brake hose was slashed. If I had driven it, the brakes would have failed. At speed, it could have been fatal. Reiner looked stunned. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Are you sure? Maybe it was just wear and tear. My friend Oliver is a mechanic with 35 years of experience. He wasn't wrong. Someone deliberately damaged my car. My son lowered his head, clenching his hands into fists. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know they would go this far. Everything inside me broke. So he did know something after all. What are you talking about, Reiner? My voice became harsh. What did you know? He looked up, and I saw fear and guilt in his eyes. Dad, it's complicated. Then explain it to me, I tried to remain calm. Explain why your wife and her brother tried to cause an accident involving me. They weren't trying to kill you, Reiner said quickly. At least they weren't supposed to. It was supposed to be just a minor accident so you wouldn't be able to use your car for a while. Why? I was amazed at how calmly my son spoke about deliberate sabotage. Reiner ran his hand through his hair, looking both guilty and cornered. It's work-related, investments. Chung is helping me with a big deal, but there are some legal complications. They thought that if something happened to you, that would distract attention. It would give us time. Time for what, Reiner? I felt anger rising inside me. For some kind of illegal scheme? Not illegal. He looked hurt. Just in a gray area. They're Chinese investors. They want to invest in the American real estate market, but there are restrictions. And you thought your father's little accident was a reasonable price to pay for this deal? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I didn't know they were planning something with your car. Reiner looked desperate. I thought they just wanted to distract you somehow. Maybe make a fake call from the bank or something like that. What about Prescott? I asked, feeling my throat tighten. Is he safe? Of course. Reiner now looked offended. Lily would never hurt our son? Never. But me, please. I shook my head, feeling bitter. You know, Reiner, your mother would be very disappointed. That seemed to hit a nerve. He clenched his fists even tighter. Don't bring my mother into this. You never accepted Lily, never gave her a chance. You only saw her as a Chinese woman hunting for citizenship, not the person I love. And that justifies trying to kill me? They didn't want to kill you, he repeated. Just temporarily incapacitate you. A slash break line can kill you, Reiner. Don't be naive. My son looked shocked, as if the thought had just occurred to him for the first time. I'll talk to Lily. This has gone too far. I think we should go to the police, I said firmly. No! Reiner jumped to his feet. Dad, please, it will destroy our family. Think of Prescott. I stood facing my son, feeling the weight of years and disappointment pressing down on my shoulders. I am thinking of him, of how he is growing up in a family where his mother thinks it is acceptable to hurt others for money. You don't understand, Reiner shook his head. We have problems, financial problems. This deal could have changed everything. You could have come to me for help, I said quietly. I'm your father. You've never approved of my decisions, he replied bitterly. Ever since I married Lily, why should I have thought it would be any different now? We stood face to face, father and son, separated by a chasm of misunderstanding and resentment that had built up over the years. At that moment, I realized that I might have lost Reiner long ago, long before Lily came into his life. I want you to promise me two things, I finally said. First, no one else will try to hurt me. Second, Prescott must not suffer for telling me. Reiner nodded, looking exhausted. I promise. And I'm sorry, Dad. I really am. I looked at my son, trying to figure out if he was being sincere. Finally, I nodded. I won't go to the police, for now, but if anything happens to me or Prescott, I've left a detailed letter with my lawyer. It was a lie. I didn't have a lawyer, and I hadn't left any letters. But Reiner didn't know that, and he looked worried. Nothing will happen, he assured me. I'll talk to Lily and Chung today. Okay, I said, turning to leave, feeling incredibly tired. Take care of Prescott, Reiner. Dad, he called after me when I was already a few steps away. You know I love you, right? No matter what. I stopped but didn't turn around, afraid he would see the tears welling up in my eyes. I know, son. And I love you too. With those words, I left, leaving my son standing in the empty park under the gray sky. On my way home, I thought about Prescott, about how to protect him from all this madness. The boy was the only bright spot in this grim story, and I couldn't let him suffer because of the actions of adults. At home, I called Oliver again and told him about my conversation with Reiner. The old mechanic listened silently, only occasionally grunting into the phone. So what are you going to do? He asked when I finished. I don't know, I replied honestly. I'll keep an eye on things for now. Maybe Reiner will actually stop them. And if he doesn't? Oliver's voice was serious. If they try again? I was silent for a long time, thinking about my answer. Then I'll do everything I can to protect Prescott, even if it means going against my own son. After talking to Reiner in the park, I lived in a state of constant anxiety for 3 days. Even though Oliver had fixed the brakes, I didn't dare use my car. What if they tried again? What if I wasn't warned next time? The thought that my own son might have been involved in an attempt to harm me gnawed at me, eating away at my soul like acid. On Monday, I tried to call Reiner, but his phone was constantly turned off. This increased my anxiety. My son was usually always available, especially on workdays. I left several messages on his voicemail asking him to call me back, but I received no response. On Tuesday, I waited to meet Prescott in the park as usual. I sat on our bench for 2 hours, but my grandson never showed up. At other times, I would have assumed he was simply ill or had other plans, but now his absence made me even more nervous. By Wednesday, I was on edge. Having received no response to my calls and messages, I decided to take more direct action. At 10 in the morning, I called a taxi and went to Prescott's school, Lincoln Elementary on the northern edge of Wheeling. The school greeted me with its usual morning bustle, children playing on the playground under the supervision of teachers, parents saying goodbye to late students at the entrance. I headed straight to the administrative office, where I was greeted by an elderly secretary with a kind face. "How can I help you?" she asked, looking up from her computer. "Good morning," I tried to smile. "I'm Eugene Holleran, Prescott's grandfather. I'd like to know how he's doing. He didn't come to our usual meeting yesterday." The secretary looked at me with slight surprise. "Oh, Mr. Holleran, Prescott has been absent since Monday. His parents said they were going on a family trip. Didn't you know?" My heart sank. "No, I didn't," I replied honestly. "How long are they gone for?" She checked something on the computer. "The note says 2 weeks, something to do with family circumstances. And they didn't leave any contact information? Where could I reach them?" The secretary shook her head. "I'm afraid not. Just a standard absence notice. Can't you reach them by phone?" I tried, but without success. I felt panic rising, but tried not to show it. "Thank you for the information." Leaving the school, I stood on the sidewalk, not knowing what to do next. A family trip? Without warning? After our conversation with Reiner, it seemed extremely suspicious. What if they had decided to just run away? To take Prescott away from me? I decided to go straight to my son's house. Maybe there I would find some clues as to where they might have gone. The taxi dropped me off at a familiar 2-story house with a neatly trimmed lawn. Now the lawn looked neglected. Several advertising flyers lay by the front door, and the mailbox was overflowing. I rang the doorbell, although I was almost certain that no one would answer. And so it was. The house greeted me with dead silence. I walked around, peering into the windows, but all the curtains were drawn, preventing me from seeing what was going on inside. At that moment, I noticed an elderly woman working in the garden of the neighboring house. She watched me with obvious suspicion. "Are you looking for someone?" she asked, straightening up and leaning on her garden trowel. "Good morning," I said, approaching the fence separating the properties. "I'm Eugene Holleran, Reiner's father. I'm looking for my son and his family, but it seems they've left." The woman's face softened. "Ah, you're Reiner's father." "Yes, they left on Sunday evening. Quite hastily, I would say." "Hastily?" I tensed up. "What do you mean?" The neighbor looked around, as if checking to see if anyone was listening, then moved closer to the fence. "Well, they were loading things into cars in the middle of the night. I happened to see it from my bedroom window. I have insomnia, you know. 2 cars, one of them theirs, the other a big black one, and there were lots of suitcases, as if they were leaving for a long time." "Did you happen to hear where they were going?" I asked, trying to hide my growing anxiety. "No, but," she looked back again, "there were these Chinese people there. His wife's relatives, I suppose. They were talking loudly in their language, waving their arms. It looked like they were in a hurry." "And the boy? Did you see Prescott?" "Yes, the little one was with them. He looked sleepy. His mother was carrying him in her arms to the car." Poor child, in the middle of the night. I thanked my neighbor for the information and slowly walked away, feeling my legs turn to jelly. Everything pointed to Reiner, Lily, and her relatives hastily leaving town, taking Prescott with them. But why? Because of our conversation. Were they afraid I would go to the police? Or did they have other reasons for fleeing? Not knowing what else to do, I called a taxi to the nearest police station. Maybe the police could help, and especially when it came to the safety of a child. The Wheeling Police Station was a small brick building in the center of town. Inside, it smelled of coffee and paper, and behind the front desk sat a young officer with tired eyes. "How can I help you, sir?" he asked when I approached. "I want to report my grandson missing," I said, trying to sound confident, "and possibly an attempt to harm me." The officer sat up straight, his gaze becoming more attentive. "Please explain in more detail." I told him the whole story, About Lily and her brother's strange behavior, about Prescott's warning, about the damage to my car's brakes, about the sudden disappearance of the entire family. With every word, I saw a skeptical expression appear on the officer's face. "So," he said when I finished, "you're saying that your Chinese daughter-in-law and her brother tried to cause you to have an accident, and now they've taken your grandson and disappeared?" "Yes, that's right," I confirmed, feeling how silly it sounded when I said it out loud. "And your son, has he also been kidnapped, or did he leave with them of his own free will?" He, I hesitated. We talked before they left. He knew about the attempt to damage my car, but claimed he didn't think it would be dangerous. The officer nodded, making notes in his notebook. "And you have evidence that your car was deliberately damaged?" My friend Oliver Jenkins, a former mechanic, inspected it and confirmed that the brake hose had been slashed. "But you didn't go to a repair shop for an official report, and you didn't keep the damaged part for examination?" I had to admit that I hadn't. "And your son, an adult, voluntarily left with his wife, taking their child with him," the officer summarized my story. "Sir, I'm afraid there is no crime here. Parents have the right to travel with their child. As for your car, without physical evidence and witness testimony, we cannot open an investigation." "But my grandson is in danger." I raised my voice, feeling a growing sense of despair. "Do you have concrete evidence that the child is in danger from his own parents?" the officer asked patiently. I had to admit that I didn't have any such evidence. Despite all my suspicions, Lily had always been good to Prescott. "Listen, Mr. Holleran," the officer softened, seeing my state. "I understand your concern, but what you're describing sounds more like a family conflict than a crime. Perhaps your son and his wife decided to take a vacation to escape the tense atmosphere. Give them time to cool off. I'm sure they'll contact you when they're ready." "What if they don't?" I asked quietly. "If you still can't reach them in a week, come back," he said, handing me his business card. "We can start an official search. But keep in mind that for adults who have voluntarily left their homes and have not committed a crime, our options are limited." I left the police station feeling completely defeated. No one takes my concerns seriously. To everyone, it looks like the paranoia of an old man who is unhappy with his Chinese daughter-in-law. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am exaggerating the danger. Not knowing where else to go, I called a taxi and went home. All the way there, I thought about my next steps. Maybe I should try to find Reiner's colleagues' contact details or hire a private detective. But all these options would take time, which I might not have if Prescott was really in danger. When the taxi stopped at my house, I was surprised to see Reiner's familiar car in the driveway. My heart beat faster. Had my son returned? What did this mean? I paid the driver and hurried to the house. The door was locked, just as I had left it. But when I went inside, I immediately sensed a stranger's presence. Reiner was sitting in my chair in the living room. He looked even more exhausted than when we last met. Unshaven, in rumpled clothes, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "Reiner!" I froze in the doorway, not knowing whether to be happy or wary. "What are you doing here? Where's Prescott?" "Hi, Dad." My son's voice sounded tired and lifeless. "I've been waiting for you. We need to talk." I cautiously entered the room, keeping my eyes on Reiner. "I've been trying to reach you for several days. I went to your house in Prescott's school. A neighbor said you left in the middle of the night with your suitcases." "Yes, we left." Reiner ran his hand over his face. "It was necessary." "Where's Prescott?" I repeated, feeling fear tighten my throat. "Is he okay?" "He's with Lily and her parents," Reiner replied. "He's safe." "In China?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "No, not yet." Reiner looked tense. "They're in New York, preparing to fly out." "Reiner, what's going on?" I sat down opposite my son, trying to read his expression. "Why did you run away? What was the rush?" My son was silent for a long time, staring at the floor, then finally looked up. After our conversation, I tried to stop Chung and his partners. I told them we couldn't take such a risk, that the damage to your car had gone too far, but they weren't happy. "What do you mean?" I tensed up. "This deal I mentioned, it's bigger than I let you know. And Chung isn't just Lily's brother. He represents certain interests in China." "What interests?" I was beginning to realize that the situation was more serious than I had thought. "Governmental," Reiner replied quietly. He works for the Chinese government, more specifically for certain structures within it that are involved in economic expansion. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what I had heard. And you knew about this when you started working with him? Not right away, Reiner shook his head. At first, I thought it was a normal investment deal. Then I realized they were using me to circumvent restrictions on foreign investment. And when I tried to get out of the deal, they started to pressure me. First, they hinted at problems with Lily's visa. Then they became more direct. Did they threaten you? My voice trembled with concern for my son, despite all his mistakes. Not directly, but they made it clear that it was too late to back out. And when I told them about our conversation, about you knowing about the car, they decided you were a threat. A chill ran down my spine. And that's why you took Prescott away? To protect him from me? No. Reiner looked genuinely shocked. To protect him from them. When I refused to continue working with them after the incident with your car, Chung suggested that Lily return to China with Prescott. He said that her parents would help with his education there, that he would have a better future. She agreed. Without your consent, I was stunned. With mine, Reiner admitted quietly. At first, I thought it was temporary, that we would just wait until things calmed down. But then I realized they weren't planning on coming back, that it was a one-way ticket. I looked at my son, trying to understand what he was feeling. And you came to me because I can't lose my son, Reiner's voice trembled. I realized I made a terrible mistake, that I let myself be used. I let them put you in danger, and now Prescott too. I don't know what to do, Dad. For the first time in many years, I saw my adult son looking so lost, so vulnerable. Despite my anger and disappointment, I felt I had to help him. You said they're in New York? I asked, beginning to think of a plan. When are they flying out? Tomorrow evening. They have tickets for a flight to Shanghai via Beijing. What about Prescott? Does he want to go? Reiner shook his head. He cried all the way to New York. He didn't want to leave school. His friends. You. Lily told him it was temporary, that we would join them soon. But I know she's lying. Why do you think that? Because she told me something else, Reiner swallowed, that I betrayed them, that I chose you over my family, that I no longer deserve to be Prescott's father. I saw my son fighting back tears and my heart ached. Despite all his mistakes, he was still my child. What do you want to do? I asked quietly. Stop them, Reiner replied firmly. Don't let them take Prescott to China, but I don't know how. I have no proof of their intentions. Legally, Lily has the same rights to our son as I do. I thought about the situation, considering the possible options. We could go to the police and say that she's trying to take the child without your consent. But she has my consent, Reiner reminded me. I signed the permission for the child to leave when I thought it was a temporary trip. What about the FBI? If Chung really is an agent of a foreign government, without evidence? They won't act fast enough, Reiner shook his head. Besides, Chung is cautious. He hasn't technically broken any laws. We sat in silence, realizing the gravity of the situation. My grandson, my flesh and blood, could disappear forever, end up in a foreign country, grow up without knowing his father and grandfather. The thought was unbearable. There's only one way, I said finally. We have to go to New York, immediately. To talk to Lily directly, try to convince her, or, as a last resort, take Prescott away before they left. Will you come with me? Reiner looked surprised. After everything I've done? You're my son, I replied simply, and Prescott is my grandson. Family is family, even when they make mistakes. For the first time in our conversation, something resembling hope appeared on Reiner's face. Thank you, Dad. I don't deserve your help, but we'll talk about that later, I interrupted him. Right now, it's more important to get ready and leave as soon as possible. Do you have the address where they're staying? Reiner nodded. A hotel near Kennedy Airport. Lily sent me a message when they checked in. She doesn't know that I figured out her plans. Okay, I said, standing up, feeling a surge of energy I hadn't felt in a long time. Give me half an hour to get ready, and we'll leave. When Reiner went out to the porch to call and book us tickets on the next flight to New York, I was left alone in the living room for a moment. My gaze fell on Bertha's photograph standing on the mantelpiece. Help me protect our grandson, I whispered to her image. Give me the strength to do what must be done. The flight to New York did not happen. An hour after our conversation, Reiner received a call from Lily and everything changed. I saw his face become increasingly tense during the conversation. He responded with short phrases, mostly listening, sometimes whispering. When he finished the call, he looked completely devastated. They know I'm here, he said, sinking into a chair. Chung somehow tapped my phone. Lily said that if I try to come to New York, they'll fly to Shanghai immediately. They already have replacement tickets. I felt my last hope slip away. What now? Reiner was silent for a long time, then looked up at me. She wants to talk to you. She said it's all a misunderstanding, that no one wanted to hurt you, that you got it all wrong. I don't believe her. My voice sounded harsher than I intended. The brake hose wasn't cut on its own. Dad, Reiner sighed, at least listen to her. For Prescott's sake. She said she'd let you talk to him if you listened to her explanation. It was blackmail, but I had no choice. I agreed to a video call, and Reiner set up his laptop on the kitchen table. Lily appeared on the screen a few minutes later. She looked flawless, as always. No sign of fatigue or stress, despite the sudden departure and tense situation. Behind her, I could see a hotel room, but Prescott was nowhere to be seen. Hello, Eugene. Her voice sounded calm, with a slight accent. Thank you for agreeing to talk. Where's Prescott? I asked, ignoring her greeting. You promised I could talk to him. First, we need to clear up a few things. Lily tilted her head slightly. Reiner said you think we wanted to hurt you? That's not true. The brake hose on my car was slashed. I tried to speak calmly but firmly. My grandson overheard you and your brother discussing some kind of explosion involving my car. Lily shook her head, her face expressing something akin to sympathy. Prescott misunderstood. We were talking about my uncle's old car, which broke down here in America. He brought a classic 1968 Ford Mustang, but the engine failed. In Chinese, we said bao jia, which can mean both explode and break down. We were discussing how to dispose of the car because it would be too expensive to repair. I looked at her face, searching for signs of a lie, but she remained confident and calm. Then why did you all run away in the middle of the night? Why is Prescott skipping school? Why couldn't Reiner reach you? We didn't run away, Lily frowned slightly. My brother's plans changed. He had to return to China urgently for work. And since we had been planning a trip for a long time to show Prescott his mother's homeland, we decided to take the opportunity and go together. As for the phones, I forgot the charger in the rush, and Reiner didn't have international roaming. It all sounded smooth, too smooth. She countered each of my suspicions with a simple, everyday explanation, but my inner voice screamed that it was a lie. What about the brake hose? I insisted. Are you going to explain that away as a coincidence too? Lily hesitated for a moment, then turned to someone off camera and said a few phrases in Chinese. I heard a voice that probably belonged to Chung, although he himself was not visible. My brother says it could have been vandalism, she said, turning back to me. There have been several cases of car damage in Wyling recently. Maybe you were the victim of hooligans. A very convenient explanation, I said, not hiding my sarcasm. But why my car? And why just when your brother started asking strange questions about my car? Dad, Reiner, who was sitting next to me, interjected. Chung is interested in American cars, I told you. He was just making conversation. I looked at my son, trying to figure out if he really believed this story, or if he was just desperately clinging to the possibility that his wife was innocent. I want to talk to Prescott, I said, getting back to the point. You promised. Lily nodded and turned, calling someone over. Prescott, come here. Your grandfather wants to talk to you. A few seconds later, my grandson appeared on the screen. He looked tired but not scared or upset. Grandpa, his face lit up when he saw me. Are you going to China too? No, sweetie, I tried to smile. I just wanted to see how you were doing. Are you okay? Yes, Prescott nodded. We're in a huge hotel, and there's a swimming pool. Mom said we're going to fly to China, and I'll see the Great Wall and the Terracotta Warriors, and then we'll come home with Dad. I noticed Lily put her hand on her son's shoulder, squeezing it gently. Tell Grandpa what you saw in New York. Prescott began excitedly talking about skyscrapers and yellow taxis. But I looked into his eyes. Something was wrong. His gaze didn't match his enthusiastic tone. It was as if he were repeating a memorized script. Prescott, I interrupted him gently, do you remember what you told me at the family dinner? About the car? The boy hesitated, glancing quickly at his mother, then nodded. Yes, I misunderstood, Grandpa. Mom explained it to me. They were talking about another car, Uncle Chung's. His voice sounded uncertain, and I could almost physically feel Lily squeezing his shoulder. My heart sank. The boy had been made to repeat a lie. It's okay, sweetie, I said softly. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. When you come back, we'll meet in the park again, okay? Of course, Prescott smiled, but I saw a shadow of doubt in his eyes. Mom said we'll be back very soon. Right, Mom? Lily nodded but said nothing. Instead, she gently pushed Prescott away. Go play while the grown-ups talk. When her grandson disappeared from view, Lily turned back to me. See? He's perfectly fine. It's just a family trip. How long are you going to be gone? I asked directly. Lily hesitated. 3 months at first, then